Today's video is one of 5 where I share an entire week of working in the taxi. This is Monday. On this particular day, I actually met a friend at the Great Southwark Street cab stop. And I don't have to go far before picking up this job on Blackfriars Road. And they want to go to the junction of Bermondsey Street and Long Lane. This run is super simple, and I actually go past the Knowledge Examination Centre where I sat my exams as part of this run. We run it along Southwark Street, right Southwark Bridge Road, past the Shell petrol station, left onto Marshalsea Road, forward into Great Dover Street and along onto Long Lane. They want to stop just here before you get to the junction of Bermondsey Street. You used to be able to drive all the way from the bottom of Bermondsey Street all the way up to the top, Tooley Street, right by London Bridge Station. And because there's lots of bars and restaurants, coffee shops along this stretch, it was kind of a good hunting ground. You could go along there, and if you didn't have any luck there, you might likely pick up something by London Bridge Station. Sadly, the whole area has now sort of been changed, so I exit off via Tanner Street and join back on by Tower Bridge Road. Once I get out onto Tower Bridge Road, I'm thinking I can actually go to the Shard. And again, because of the road changes, you can only access the Shard from the east. There's a taxi rank outside the Shard, but it's quite good because people from London Bridge might walk to there, but also people who might have come out of Guy's Hospital, also quite nearby. I'm quite lucky there's no one on the feeder rank or the main rank itself, and I only have to sit there for a minute before I pick up this gentleman who wants to go over to the city. Now, one of the reasons I like to join a taxi rank in the cab is that it offers a little bit of downtime. But as you've just seen in the example at the Shard, there's sometimes absolutely no time at all to get a single morsel of food. And that's why I want to introduce the sponsor of today's video, which is of course yFood. Now, we've seen yFood on the channel before, and they are perfect for my work in the cab. But I've found yFood invaluable not just in the taxi, but in my day-to-day life as well. So for instance, the other week, I was at the taxi garage having my cab repaired early in the morning. Then the next day, I was on the road driving to Disneyland Paris. It will all come in a future video. But the great thing was that yFood really stepped up there. I didn't know when or where I was going to be able to get a lunch break and what my lunch options might be. So by carrying a couple of bottles of yFood in my bag, I know that I'm guaranteed no matter what circumstance I go into. There's a perfect blend of carbohydrates and protein, a full 500 calories in each bottle, a completely sustainable meal to keep you full. I'm a sucker for sweet treats, so I'm rocking the dessert favourites. Just announced the fudge brownie flavour. Love that, proper heavenly and rich, awesome. The best part is for you guys is that yFood are giving you a full 10% off your entire order. That's unlimited for any order size. Just use my code TAXI10 or click the link in the description down below. The first part is you're forced left southbound on the Borough High Street. Once we reorient ourselves, it's quite lucky that we're in a taxi because only taxis, buses and cycles are allowed over London Bridge between the hours of 7 AM till 7 PM. As I'm going over London Bridge, I'm already thinking I've got to try and avoid Bank Junction as we're in that working hours when the bank restrictions are active. After a little bit of thinking, it doesn't actually make any difference to my route calculation. We just get a left on a Cannon Street, go past Cannon Street Station. Cannon is actually a corruption of Candlewick Street, and that actually comes from candle makers who are actually based in this area in the medieval times. We go forward at the junction of Queen Victoria Street and go past the Financial Times building on the left hand side. Next time you're in this area, do take a look at the astrology clock in this area. You'll notice a familiar face right in the centre of the dial. From here, it's just the right into New Change, and we set down on the left just outside the St Paul's Cathedral Choir School. Now, once I'm paid and I'm about to pull off, there's actually a group of people that come over and hail my cab down. The first thing I have to do is immediately scan the area. If you look across the road, there's actually a taxi on the rank there, and I've got to ascertain as to whether that driver is working or not. In this case, he's parked towards the back of the rank, which might indicate he's just briefly parked up to eat his sandwiches or something like that. If the driver was at the front of the rank and they had their light on, that would mean I'd have to pass the job over to them. When a driver's on a rank, they're not actually ranking for that particular establishment, i.e. the New Chain shopping centre or a particular hotel. They're actually ranking in that immediate area. So whatever job comes up within a reasonable distance should be passed over to that driver. And they asked for the Citadines Hotel, Islington. Now immediately when people say Citadines, I'm thinking either High Holborn, Goswell Road, Northumberland Avenue, but they say Islington. And I had to really scratch for this one. I'm thinking, Islington? Maybe it's part of the Business Design Centre, because there's a few hotels nestled in there because it's a great exhibition space. And they tell me it's actually a place called Shelley Place. I'd never heard of it. But then as we drive, it then becomes clear that I can drop them on Upper Street. There's an entrance that leads through there. This is super simple. I'm just basically taking the very start of the A1. The A1 is actually the road that joins St Paul's Cathedral all the way up to Scotland. Go around St Paul's Cathedral into the Rotunda, leave that by Aldersgate Street, forward into Goswell Road, bash that all the way up, get the right into Islington High Street, forward up into Upper Street, and then set down on the left opposite the church. If there's an area or a hotel I don't know, what's most important is understanding where they might enter from. When we learn the knowledge, we actually have to learn exactly where the door is or the access is. So if you know that there's a side entrance, that can also come in handy as well. Once I drop, I turn around and start heading back into town, and I'm astounded to have a hand go up almost instantly. This sometimes happens. If there's a problem with buses, you'll get people hail you from bus stops. This lady wants to go to Harley Street. Now, if you don't know, Harley Street and kind of like the associated streets nearby are everything to do with private medical in London. This job is super simple. We just run it back down Upper Street. We go past the statue of Sir Hugh Middleton, who's right on that island between Essex Road and Upper Street. Sir Hugh Middleton is one of the instigators of the New River project, which runs through Islington, up near Finsbury Park, and was a way of getting clean water into London. We just reverse the way we've come back down, we get a right onto City Road, we go past Claremont Square, which any Harry Potter fans will know is the location of the Order of the Phoenix. Now, it's this junction of Penton Street, which I can imagine is almost inducing of PTSD for the older cabbies. Just over to the right was actually where the old public carriage office was, where examinations and appearances took place. And quite ironically, it's now the headquarters of the TfL cycle scheme, sponsored by Santander Cycle. We have to wiggle around the gyratory to get ourselves onto Gray's Inn Road, and that then pulls us neatly onto the beginning of the Euston Road, going past the King's Cross Lighthouse and of course King's Cross Station itself. On the right you will see St Pancras Renaissance, another Harry Potter nod, but that hotel was also the first hotel in London to have flushing toilets. Luxury, I know. We buzz our way through the underpass, straight into Marylebone Road, left into Harley Street, set our passenger down. Pretty simple. This is a great spot to be dropping off because we're a little bit more central. No immediate joy, I head to Marylebone High Street. There's a couple of cabs on the rank there. Taxi ranks can sometimes be a really good barometer of how much work are on the streets. I.e., if the taxi ranks are full with people are queuing at a lot of ranks, that can tell you that there's not much work on the street. I go to Paddington Street, go to the toilet, quickly stretch my legs before picking up this job on the junction of Paddington Street and Baker Street. Now, I got a little bit confused on this one. When they got in, I was pretty certain they wanted to go to North Audley Street. There's a club, like hotel kind of establishment at the bottom of North Audley Street, just before you come to Grosvenor Square. I think the number is something like 30 Grosvenor Square or something. Even though it's not actually on Grosvenor Square, the door is on North Audley Street. So from where I am, it's pretty simple. I just run it all the way down Baker Street, go past the food hall at Selfridges, and then I can drop them directly outside. Once I get there, they inform me this isn't the destination that they're after. As it turns out, they were after Grosvenor Hill, just north of Berkeley Square. Thankfully, because this is the route I would have driven anyway, we haven't actually wasted any time or gone the wrong direction to get them to Grosvenor Hill. So I just carry on, we go around Grosvenor Square, I wiggle through this back street, which I think is Adams Row, something like that, which brings us out onto Davies Street, so I can get Borden Street and set at Grosvenor Hill. As we're driving, I'm picking up a little bit of the conversation, and it's actually the estate agent who's showing some prospective buyers and clients around to various flats and properties in this area. Very nice. Had I got the wrong destination, if I'd added a few streets that didn't need to be there, then what I usually do is I'd knock a couple of quid off the meter. I have a little bit more of a hunt around the Mayfair area. I take Duke Street to get me the side door of Selfridges. Being stuck at a red light is actually sometimes one of the best places to pick up a job. It kind of like makes your cab this focal point. You're like right at the front of the lights and people can see you. So I do like this, and that's exactly how I pick up this job. These people want to go to Egerton Gardens. This is one of those streets you can never really forget, and it's just off the Brompton Road on the way out to South Kensington. Largely because the street is quite distinctive as well. Egerton, if you look at the crescent, like the Egerton Gardens on a map, it kind of looks like an egg, I guess. This is almost like an extension of my most typical journey in a cab. This is super bread and butter stuff, which is basically Selfridges to Harrods or Selfridges to Knightsbridge. I won't bore you with the details on this one because you've seen me do this job plenty of times. It pretty much is a shuttle bus route for us taxis. Egerton Gardens, again, it's not a bad place to drop because I'm in the South Kensington area. A little bit quieter than normal because of the fact it's school holiday. But luckily I managed to pick up the Bibendum restaurant, and these people want to go over to Harley Street. Bibendum is actually the French name for the Michelin Man. Wonderful building here. It's an old tyre garage that was actually redeveloped by the late Sir Terence Conran. Part of the reason why the Conran shop is attached to the back. It's not a bad run. We have to sit in the usual rubbish on the approach to Scotch Corner. Then from there we peel off on the slip road so we can get ourselves onto Park Lane. Go past the Duke of Wellington's house. Park Lane is reasonably clear today, and then we get into Mayfair. Now, to get myself up to Wigmore Street, which is like the street at the very bottom of Harley Street and Wimpole Street, I'm going to use Duke Street, which ironically was the street where I picked up the job that brought me down into the South Kensington area. It's a little bit busy on Duke Street, but this is certainly better than sitting on the alternate option, which would be Park Street. We get through, we're onto Wigmore Street, I run it up Wimpole Street, and the other part of this is finding out whereabouts on Harley Street they'd like. Wimpole Street runs one way northbound, Harley Street runs one way southbound. So I have to ascertain which number they want, which then dictates where I traverse across to set them on Harley Street. In this case, they're at the very top of Harley Street, Marylebone Road, and then come back down on ourselves. I actually have to do quite a lot of hunting before I get onto my next job, but managed to pick up on Bruton Street, just off of Berkeley Square. The lady gets in and asks if she can get as close as possible to M&M's World, or Leicester Square. She might not be going to M&M's World, but it's kind of a good point of reference because it tells you which side of Leicester Square she may be after. It's not even that far of a journey. To make matters even worse, the bottom half of Regent Street is shut, which is why there is a lot of traffic in this Old Bond Street area. So I wiggle round the back of the Royal Academy using Burlington Gardens, get ourselves onto Old Bond Street, and that brings us out onto Piccadilly. Now, one thing I always do on Piccadilly is just assess how much traffic is leading up to Piccadilly Circus, because that can make a huge difference to the journey. I'm not quite satisfied that sitting in Piccadilly is going to be the best idea here, so I exit down St James's Street so I can wriggle around St James's Square. I let the passenger know about this because sometimes, passengers are like, well, look, Piccadilly's kind of straight there. You just go straight to Piccadilly and that gets you to Leicester Square. The issue is that we'll be sitting through a lot of traffic lights. And if she's got a cab, chances are that she wants to get there relatively quickly. Now, this isn't the usual Monday experience, but I managed to get her there, drop her off, we're all good. More hunting, and knowing that I've done relatively okay in that Mayfair area, I head back in that direction. Now, in hindsight, because it's school holidays, probably one of the better options might have been to sit on the rank by M&M's World. I sometimes find that during school holidays, you just got to go full tourist mode. London Eye, Tower of London, London Zoo, all those kind of fun things. Quite a bit of a hunt round before I get my next job. This gentleman hails me down just before the zebra crossing on Berkeley Square, Bruton Street, close to where we just picked up the previous job, and he wishes to go to the junction of Margaret Street and Regent Street. Now, that was the important instruction there. He actually says the junction of Margaret and Regent Street. If he was just going to Cavendish Square or maybe the back door of John Lewis, then I would wiggle this up the middle, so St George Street, Hanover Square and through there, because that cuts out a lot of the rubbish on Regent Street. But he specifically asked for Regent Street and Margaret Street, so I have to honour that and I have to sit in Regent Street for a little bit. A little bit of time, but we drop him off. It's all good. And I don't have to go very far before picking up the next job, and that is here by Meat Liquor on Margaret Street. These people just get in and say Southwark Bridge. As a cab driver, I always want to get as much information as possible so I can help my customers in the best way possible. So as we move off and I go around Cavendish Square, I quickly ask them, whereabouts on Southwark Bridge is it? They let me know that it's the Ibis Styles Hotel. My immediate thought on how to do this run is, how will I navigate the mass that is the Soho or West End area? As we've already learned, Regent Street is shut southbound, so if I want to go west of Soho, I really have to divert through Mayfair and beyond. So I keep it high, I opt to go over the top of Soho, and I know that I'm going to have to come back out onto Oxford Street at some point. Ideally, I want to get ourselves over into the city. As I've opted to go high and over the top of Soho, I only really have two options for the bridges. It's either going to be Waterloo Bridge or Blackfriars Bridge. You might be thinking, well, why don't you just take Southwark Bridge? The only thing is that Southwark, you can only access Southwark Bridge from the north if you're heading from the east. I.e. I have to go all the way around back on myself to get over the bridge. So you take Blackfriars or Waterloo. Mortimer Street is fantastic because it runs parallel with Oxford Street, meaning we can cruise along here quite nicely. And to get ourselves onto Oxford Street, I use the newly reversed Newman Street. And there's only one set of traffic lights at the very end as you join onto Oxford Street, meaning it's going to be a lot better than the parallel option, which is Wells Street.
Yeah, you joined Monday Club. Wow.
Go past Tottenham Court Road Station. We go through Bloomsbury Way, Bloomsbury Square, and that pulls us out onto the beginning of Theobald's Road. We're actually going to take Drake Street into Red Lion Square, and that pulls us through onto High Holborn. My main rationale for this is that if I take Waterloo Bridge, Stamford Street can get a little bit heavy on the junction of Blackfriars Road. So if I'm coming over Blackfriars Bridge, I neatly cut that out. We go past the wonderful Waterhouse Square on the left-hand side. Now, if you don't know, Alfred Waterhouse, the architect that gives his name to this building, is also responsible for the old UCLH Hospital, that's the one that's in the shape of a cross, and of course the Natural History Museum, arguably one of the most beautiful buildings in London. We get to Holborn Circus and we peel left onto Charterhouse Street. This is because I want to get onto Farringdon Road to set us up neatly for Blackfriars Bridge. But on Charterhouse Street, you'll notice that the traffic is actually backed up to Ely Place. I know from this direction where we are sat now, it's very likely to take about 3 changes of the traffic lights to get us through. So I turn around and I opt for Snow Hill, going over Holborn Viaduct, neatly peeling round left on Snow Hill, and the lights here are quite a bit quicker because the left turn is more favoured. And we then get to go underneath Holborn Viaduct. You might be wondering, why is Holborn Viaduct this wonderful, magnificent looking bridge that kind of just spans over a road in the City of London? Well, that's because it once spanned over the River Fleet, one of the largest rivers that flowed into the River Thames. The River Fleet has now since been covered over, and Farringdon Road roughly covers the path of the River Fleet. From here it's simple, we just go straight over Blackfriars Bridge, get our left into Southwark Street, all the way along, left into Southwark Bridge Road, and we can set the forecourt that way. After dropping this job, it can be a little bit difficult to work out where I want to head to get my next job. Because as it's a Monday, the City of London is a bit quieter. It's not going to be as predictable to pick up a job there. Thankfully, I don't have to go very far along Southwark Street before picking up this gent just before the junction of Great Southwark Street. He gets in and asks for Old Park Lane, then telling me he's actually after Le Ambassador's Casino. Now, I know that Le Ambassador's Casino is on Hamilton Place, but I get the idea. He means sort of like the Old Park Lane area. So from here, I'm just going to head straight along into Stamford Street. Now, at this time of day, going home hours, it can be a little bit difficult getting onto the Tennyson Way or IMAX roundabout, as you can see here. So I take the little neat trick of doing a right into Cornwall Road and using Upper Ground as a way of peeling onto that roundabout. I know that I want to get over Waterloo Bridge. I generally won't do these kind of like skipping around traffic lights often, only if I know there's going to be a substantial benefit. I just know that a lot of my life has been spent in those traffic lights on Stamford Street trying to get onto that roundabout. Now, as we're going around the roundabout, the gentleman actually asked me, "Are you going to use Westminster Bridge?" Now, I quite confidently reply, no. He's not asking that he wants to go via Westminster Bridge. If he was, then I would honour that and I would go in that direction. But as he's kind of just talking about the route, I use Waterloo Bridge and I tell him exactly why. When I'm thinking about that Les Ambassadors Casino area, you've got about 2 or 3 ways you can access it. You can either come in from Hyde Park Corner, arguably that would be suicide at this time of day. You can get it in from Mayfair by using Half Moon Street, but then there's a little bit of wiggling to come south. Or you can use Brick Street. Sometimes part of the role of being a taxi driver is having complete confidence in your decision. For instance, when we are tested in our examinations to become a London cab driver, sometimes the examiner will ask you a particular route, knowing that there's two equal options. Neither one is more optimum than the other, but you, as a would-be cab driver, need to be able to quite firmly and confidently say, I'm going to go this way, and you're not going to be deterred by the other route. Westminster Bridge could work, but I'm pretty adamant that going Waterloo and coming in via the Strand is going to be the better of the two routes. The other advanced bit of thinking here is that Brick Street is actually closed during working hours. There's a lot of construction going on near to there, and until 5 PM, it is closed. Quickly checking my watch, I can see that it's 10 past 5, meaning that I can use that, and that's going to be the most optimum route for this. Everything goes perfectly as planned. You can see that the cones that would have been closing Brick Street have now been moved, allowing us to very neatly use Brick Street. This takes us round the back of the Park Grand Park Lane, which isn't on Park Lane, it's on Piccadilly, and then we can get ourselves down Street, Hertford Street, and that brings us out onto that roundabout by Old Park Lane and Les Ambassadors Casino. The gentleman just wishes to be dropped outside the Como Hotel. And quite luckily, I get an on and off job here. A couple of ladies who wish to go to Primark on Oxford Street. Now, there's actually two Primarks on Oxford Street, one down the western end towards Marble Arch, and one towards the east end, which we call the poor end of Oxford Street. 9 times out of 10, everyone wants to go to the Primark near Marble Arch because it's near Selfridges and other prime shopping. But it's always worth just checking here. And geographically, we are nearer to the one by Marble Arch. It's super simple. I don't take it onto Park Lane. I use the back streets of Mayfair to get us there. So through this little neat cut through, which brings us out onto Curzon Street, South Audley Street, get ourselves a left onto South Street to go past the Egyptian Embassy, up Park Street. And as I can't do a left from Park Street onto Oxford Street, I let my passengers know that this is probably the safest and best place to stop them, and it's right on the corner of Primark. They're absolutely fine with this. Now, I'm quite fortunate enough to pick up a job again straight away, who want to go to the Royal National Hotel at Russell Square. I'm thinking I want to get myself onto Mortimer Street. I'm going to come in via Gower. In theory, I could just run it all the way along Oxford Street, touch Tottenham Court Road, Great Russell Street, go past the British Museum, and I'm into Russell Square that way. The issue is I don't really want to go the entire length of Oxford Street at this time of day. So I'm thinking I've got to get ourselves onto Wigmore Street. The trouble is, if I use Park Street where I am now, I can't turn right at Portman Square. If I take the next road, which is Orchard Street, this is probably one of my last opportunities to exit off of Oxford Street until I get to Oxford Circus, I can't turn right onto Wigmore Street either. What I have to do, as you'll see in this video, is actually go around the back of Selfridges and come out onto Duke Street. I don't know if that road actually has a name, actually. I never used to call it in appearances, but it's only because the streets have changed around in that area. Oh, Edwards Mews. So yeah, I just use Edwards Mews and that brings us out onto there. Sweet. And then from here, you just run it all the way through into Good Street, go past Good Street Station, you do that little shuffle around Tottenham Court Road, and as I'm coming along Shaney Street to get ourselves onto Gower Street, I can see the lights at the end have been green for quite some time, meaning that it's highly likely they're going to turn red as I turn up to them. So I take a right into Ridgemount Street, which brings us out onto Store Street, so I can neatly cut these out. It's another argument for anyone who's like, oh mate, why don't you just use the sat-nav? Like, sat-nav's so much better. No, the sat-nav can't see what the live conditions of the street are, so I can use that to my advantage. From here, we're pointing directly at Senate House. This is the kind of final hurdle we need to get through to get ourselves to the Royal National Hotel. Right into Mallet Street, left into Montague Place, and that takes us round the back of the British Museum. Left into Russell Square, past the Green Cabman Shelter, and the left into Bedford Way, meaning we can neatly set them in the forecourt at the Royal National. Now, I don't know what's going on, but I'm super lucky to pick up again. Some guests come out at the Royal National as I drop off. There is a taxi rank outside, but there wasn't a cab on it. So again, this job is mine. They want to go down to the London Eye. This is a super simple run. We just get ourselves out onto Russell Square. We go down Southampton Row and the Kingsway because that's going to set us up neatly for Waterloo Bridge. The passengers I get is another reason why I love being a taxi driver. It's just so varied, you never know who you're going to get. It's a father and a daughter from Mexico and they're eager to learn about a bit of history whilst they're inside of my taxi. From here we go around the Aldwych, straight over Waterloo Bridge, which is arguably a much better view than the one we had at Blackfriars earlier. Around Tennyson Way, we go down York Road, and I'm going to come in through Chicheley Street so I can drop near the rank there. As I drop off, I spy there's actually a taxi on the rank that's working, meaning I'm not going to be getting an on and off job here. From here I'm thinking I'm going to head over to like the Westminster area. I'm going to go like Parliament Square. And heading to Westminster Bridge, I see this family who hails me down near the crossing. This is super annoying because not only are they hailing me at the crossing, where of course I can't pick up, they've also got a wheelchair. Now because of the cycle lane that's there, I've got this weird little island where I can't actually get the ramp out to pick up the wheelchair. So I pull over, I speak with the passengers to let them know, look, I'm going to go a bit further up near the bus stop so I can load the wheelchair in properly. Upon speaking with them, they let me know that the ramp isn't necessary and that we can load the wheelchair in manually. So I get them out to help them with this. I'm always eager to try and get passengers into a safe location so we can load up undeterred by traffic, cyclists or other pedestrians. They hop in and it's a super easy route. They want to go to the Park Plaza at Victoria. Effectively, Parliament Square, Victoria Street. Left into Vauxhall Bridge Road and we get right into the forecourt. Thankfully the forecourt is much easier to unload than where we picked up from and it's less stressful for me and the passengers. I briefly stop outside to have a little bit of dinner, just something I previously prepared, and as I go to pull off I notice there's a family who want to go to Covent Garden. Now I sometimes find it a little bit difficult from the Victoria area because you're like right in the middle of a one-way system. There's a few roads that we taxi drivers can exclusively use, Wilton Road for example, as you'll see, but even from this point I still have to wiggle around. I'm thinking Buckingham Palace Road, I'm going to get the Mall, come out Admiralty Arch and then come out via Trafalgar Square. I basically need to get to Trafalgar Square. So I opt to Buckingham Palace via Buckingham Palace Road and sadly this is closed. So take ourselves down Palace Street, use Wilfrid Street and that brings us out onto Buckingham Gate and I can come past the Wellington Barracks. It's not ideal, it has pulled me away from the optimal route which would be the Mall, but we're able to pick this back up via Parliament Square and then we go up Whitehall. And as we're going up Whitehall, I'm thinking my problems could get a whole lot worse. I can see there's some kind of a demonstration going on outside number 10 Downing Street. Now usually when these demos happen, depending on the size of them, it just generally means you've either got to sit in it, the police might shut the road or you might have to U-turn and go the other direction. But thankfully in this instance, the police are managing it and I'm able to neatly go round the protesting group that are in the road. Pretty lucky because I wouldn't want another diversion on this route. Straight up Whitehall, around King Charles I Island and up the east side to Trafalgar Square. From here we can go via the Charing Cross police station and I set Covent Garden on the edge via Henrietta Street. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, Henrietta Street has been pedestrianised, so I can only set them on the end here, but that's good enough. After dropping, I pull away and I'm very quick to pick up another job. This lady actually wants to go to the Taj Hotel on Buckingham Gate. Now Buckingham Gate has been closed for a little while. It's a two-way stretch of road quite close to Buckingham Palace. Now this is a real nice and neat route, we just follow it back down. This time we can get Admiralty Arch and go along the Mall to set ourselves up neatly for Buckingham Gate. I'm already quite excited on the way there because Buckingham Gate has had some construction works on it, meaning that you can only go one way through it. You can only access it from the top by Buckingham Palace. But as we've seen on the route here, Buckingham Palace Road was also closed. It's another tactic I sometimes employ. If I'm struggling to find a job, then I'll hang around near the area of a road closure because there'll be less taxis passing through that area because we can't drive through it. but very likely there might be people trapped or stranded in that area. I drop off at the Taj, and then the concierge comes over and lets me know that he's got some guests who want to go again. This pays off. This is the touch that I was looking for. They want to go to the Arts Club on Dover Street. Now, in an ideal world, I would turn around at Buckingham Gate and just go back via the Mall. Unfortunately, we can't do that. With the Buckingham Palace area out of action, I either need to go around to the west, or I can come from the east up Whitehall, as I've previously done. I'm thinking with the Arts Club, it's probably more optimum if I take the west route, so I go up Grosvenor Place, around Hyde Park Corner, and along Piccadilly. And yeah, it's all super easy, it flows nicely. Piccadilly, left turn into Dover Street, and I'm able to sit very neatly outside the Arts Club. Really fortunate that it's a Monday. On a Friday, this will be lined with cars on both sides. And Dover Street is one of those streets that I frequently drive down where you'll see like a Range Rover where the wing mirror will be knocked off or something like that, because it is really quite a narrow street once you've got cars parked on either side. I have a bit more of a hunt into the Mayfair area, and coming up to the side door on Claridge's, I pick up this couple on Davies Street. Now they let me know it's a 2-drop job, so it's going to be going to Eaton Terrace and then on to Battersea. This is another bread and butter job. We leave by getting a right into Grosvenor Street and into Grosvenor Square. Now Grosvenor is actually the name of the family that owns much of the land here in Westminster. Much like I've mentioned previously, where the Russell family who own much of the Bedford estate or Russell Square, Grosvenor is the name for Westminster. Now the inheritance of this land that now belongs to the Grosvenors actually links with the street where I picked these people up from. 12-year-old Mary Davies was actually heir to this land of much of the area that we now know as Mayfair. And of course, when she married Sir Thomas Grosvenor in the 17th century, that land was then passed over to the Grosvenor family. Once we've exited off of Grosvenor Square, we get ourselves onto Park Lane, Hyde Park Corner, and the only tricky bit is I'd be coming in at Grosvenor Crescent. But because of construction works to that Pan Peninsula Hotel, this particular road is shut. So I have to come in via Wilton Place and past the Berkeley Hotel. It's a little bit of wiggling, but that then gets me into Belgrave Square, and I can do the continuation on and get ourselves into Eaton Terrace. I drop the first passenger there, and a lady wishes to go on to Battersea. She just says Orbell Street. I do the usual thing when I don't quite know where somewhere is in a taxi, and I pull this confused face and I go Orbell Street, as though to say give me more, and she just says yes, Orbell Street. And it's always quite difficult because of course you're driving or whatever, and then so I just have to come out and just say, look, oh, what's that, what street is that off of, whereabouts is that? And she says, oh yeah, if you go to Surrey Lane. Then it all comes clear. Surrey Lane is just off of Battersea Bridge Road. So to get this, I need to go over Albert Bridge. This is easy. It's basically a straight line from the map. You just go Eaton Terrace, Pimlico Road, Royal Hospital Road, past Wren's Royal Hospital on the left hand side, out onto the Chelsea Embankment, left over Albert Bridge. You've got to be really careful with the width restrictions, so you've got to get a nice straight run up for it. And then yeah, down along Albert Bridge Road, round the one way, and bosh, we're into Surrey Lane. As we're close, I stop in the Shell Waitrose services on Queenstown Road, just to grab some fuel and go for a quick toilet break. Once I've done this, I chance my arm with 9 Elms Lane. There's a lot of posh new developments in that area, and very rarely do I actually drive down there empty. It often is the case that I drop there and I might pick up again. So I decide to drive along there empty, and it doesn't go too well for me. It is all luck at the end of the day. So I go back via Vauxhall Bridge, up Vauxhall Bridge Road, and I have to wait until I get to Victoria Station before there's any sign of life. Going past the Wicked Theatre, I can see there's not many taxis on the Victoria Station rank, so I decide to join that rank. Now, whilst you can't guarantee it, most stations are kind of indicative of the area where you may end up in London. Any major station rank could pull you into the centre of London. That's a given. But often if people have finished a journey across the country, the stations will kind of follow that appropriate direction. So as an example, King's Cross, they might want to go to Islington, Camden. In our example on Victoria, you can sometimes get a lot of jobs going southwest. The people who jump in are after York Road, Battersea. And once we get moving, they actually let me know that they're quite near to Battersea Heliport. We just get ourselves Buckingham Palace Road, Pimlico Road, Royal Hospital Road. That's basically a straight line out. Chelsea Embankment. This time I opt for Battersea Bridge because I want to use Battersea Church Road. Just neatly takes that corner off and brings us in to Battersea Heliport. From here, it's only natural to head back to central London. And astonishingly, I managed to pick up on Battersea Bridge Road. Generally, I always pick up in central and you know, like your major ways out. The people I pick up, they want to go to Upper Richmond Road. Now, it throws me a little bit, not because I don't know where it is, but because you have to kind of recalibrate your mind. It's not often that I pick up directly in this area. Knowing where your first turns are, where your availability is, takes a little bit of thinking. But once we're on the way, it all comes back to me. And they give me a nice distinct point, the Arab Boy pub. Pubs are great, especially if they got a distinct name, because you can really visualise it. En route, they let me know they're just on the north side of Upper Richmond Road. Now, it is a bit of a drive again for me to get back into central, but one of the things I do like if I've done a longer job out of town is that it gives me a lot of uninterrupted time to listen to a podcast or an audiobook.
So the UK arm of Starbucks is likely to go on sale.
If you drive for a living and you don't have Audible or podcasts, then I don't know what you're doing. Podcasts are of course free, but I sometimes enjoy audiobooks because they are a lot more consolidated. There's a lot more richer material in it. Audible will give you 1 month free if you use my link in the description down below. Also, if you're interested in what podcasts and audiobooks I might be listening to in a given week in the cab, then I highly recommend subscribing to my Sunday summary email. It's where I share a bit of a behind the scenes of what's going on in my life and inside of the taxi. Again, you'll find the link for that in the description down below. That's entirely free and I publish it every week. It's a good 15 minutes or so before I get back to the King's Road, and that's going to be my first opportunity to get a job. Right by the Chelsea Town Hall, I get these ladies who want to go along to the Fulham Road, specifically Rostrevor Road. Now, there's a lot of roads that spur off of the Fulham Road, and some of them are more distinct than others. For instance, I can always remember Whittingstall Road because I just think of the TV chef Hugh Fernley Whittingstall. And then of course that connects to Lettice Street. Lettice Street I can remember because there was an examiner decades ago who would ask the point Rabbit Row to Lettice Street, and then it joins onto Munster Road. Munster Road is quite an important crossroads in Fulham. So you kind of can link these by association, and as we get going, Cabby's mate helps me out to know exactly what part of the Fulham Road it is on. King's Road runs parallel with Fulham Road, so my main decision here is what road am I going to use to get myself onto Fulham Road. In this case, I use the classic Hortensia Road. After dropping off, I work my way up to the Cromwell Road. Nice, big, open road where I can hopefully pick up a job. The bigger the road, the more likely you're going to get someone walk down to that main road. But then there's also the conflicting factor that the bigger the road, the more taxis that can potentially drive past there and get those jobs. I actually have to drive all the way back to Piccadilly before I get my next job. And it takes me about 20 minutes to do so, where the doorman of the Ritz howls me down. He's got his fancy new kind of like torches and lightsabers to kind of, you know, get the attention of taxi drivers. The gentleman I pick up wants to go to the Hilton at Paddington. Super easy stuff, and I opt to wiggle through a bit of Mayfair. That way I can cut out Hyde Park Corner, I don't have to go around that. So we come up via Half Moon Street, Curzon Street, South Audley, back past the Egyptian Embassy, South Street, and we go out via Grosvenor Gate onto Park Lane. From here, we do that little Tyburnia shuffle. So we go up Hyde Park Street, Hyde Park Square, round the Crescent, which pulls us out onto Sussex Gardens. It's the classic way of setting Parade Street for Paddington. Bread and butter stuff. We just need to go a little bit further so I can drop them off at the forecourt. It's nearing the end of my shift. You know, I'm keeping an eye on the apps. If there's anything going in my direction of home, you just want one final one just to finish you off. I have to go all the way back to Berkeley Square before I get the next job. And wow, what a touch it is. Nascot Street. This is weird because Nascot Street is a random, nondescript road with no point on it. But I can remember it instantly. When we're on the knowledge, we have to learn these things called turnarounds. And the idea being is that when you're in a knowledge examination, and even in real life, you can't just say, I'll do a U-turn here, because it's not always practical. It forms part of a turnaround, which I remember with the acronym NEG. Nascot Street, Enham Road, Glenroy Street. And it's one of those moments where you feel like really good as a cabbie because it's this random nondescript street and they're like, yeah, Nascot Street, do you know it? I'm like, of course I know Nascot Street. So super easy, we just get ourselves up onto the Westway. You exit off of Wood Lane but then turn right and then right into Nascot Street. And I'm loving this because it's right on my journey home. The A40 Westway is what I need to get west and out of London. Perfect. This video was from a Monday of part of a full Monday to Friday working in town. If you want to check out Tuesday's shift video, the day after, that video will be available here. If you want reminding as soon as those videos are published, then I highly recommend subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you know as soon as those videos go live. And if you can't wait for the next video and want to binge on some more content, then I highly recommend checking out some of the most popular content down in this corner here. See you again soon. Bye bye.